Interstate 69. More than just a road. It's a connection, a thread that is weaving communities, commerce, countries, and people together. And Indiana has led the way.
I-69 is a crown jewel in our whole infrastructure program.
I-69, really, if you had to put it in one word, is a win.
The men and women that have been on the project and what they've delivered, really it's been the best of the best of the best that have been involved with this corridor.
But it didn't happen easily.
It takes a lot to build an interstate, a lot of steps, a lot of time, a lot of thought.
Protesters were living in the trees.
Somebody threw a pound of bacon at us one time.
And now we've crossed the finish line, extending Hoosier hospitality across the continent.
Just know that people built this. Like, this is how America runs.
It just proves Indiana can do big things.
Now we celebrate the monumental achievement of completing I-69 in Indiana with a look back at those who paved the way for this dream to become a reality. This is I-69, connecting the Crossroads. August 6, 2024, Hoosiers celebrate as Indiana's portion of America's last superhighway is finally open for business. It is a 142-mile roadway that was at least 75 years in the making. The highway is the final leg in Indiana's Crossroads, directly linking Evansville, the state's third most populous city, with Indianapolis, the state's capital. It also connects towns like Oakland City, Washington, Bloomington, Martinsville, and Bargersville. How will I-69's opening benefit the state? Indiana Department of Transportation Commissioner Mike Smith says it depends on who you ask.
In terms of the transportation agency, economic development is absolutely one. How do we use our system? How do we use this project that's destined to produce $4 billion worth of economic development in the state? You look at safety and mobility. Safety, we can reduce 1,300 crashes a year with the investment that's been made in this corridor. What an opportunity.
And those numbers cited by Smith refer only to the final section of the 6-section project. We also asked others who played a part in the interstate moving forward what it means. Becky Skillman was lieutenant governor for 8 years.
I can't think of another single initiative that would help communities have the opportunity to move forward more so than the completion of I-69.
Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray of Martinsville helped pass legislation regarding the interstate.
You're going to see it tie communities together, so it's going to include them more in what's going on in the state of Indiana.
Tim Miller started working on the interstate in the 1990s for INDOT.
I would describe the completion of I-69 as a legacy. A legacy of it takes so much work to complete a facility such as this. It took a lot of work with the communities alongside, and so this is a legacy project. It will always be a legacy for the state of Indiana, and it will be a legacy for those who worked on it.
But the interstate almost didn't happen. The dream of constructing what folks in the 1970s dubbed the Southwest Indiana Highway had to overcome one challenge after another. Approval took years. There were funding issues. There was debate over its path. There was flooding. There was a pandemic. This is the story of how Indiana's portion of the great national superhighway came to be, and how Hoosiers came together to finally see the project across the finish line. It's a story that started long before the 16 years of actual construction.
There were times when we thought, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And a lot of people from down here thought the same thing. And people in Indianapolis thought the same thing.
Now that it's open, it's hard to believe that there was an enormous struggle to get this new road built from Evansville to Indianapolis. It's hard to believe that, hey, at one point, this was all land.
Steve Schaefer is the former executive director of Hoosier Voices for I-69, a public advocacy coalition made up of community and business leaders that started advocating for the interstate in the 1990s. But people first started talking about building the Southwest Indiana Highway in the 1970s. At the time, Indiana had 8 interstate routes, giving many residents easy access to other towns and jobs. Those interstates included a 157-mile section of I-69 in northeastern Indiana from Michigan to northern Indianapolis.
If you looked on a map, there's numerous interstates in the state, and there was a huge gap in southwest Indiana that people went, why isn't there a road there?
In 1991, Congress proposed a new national highway system, and the idea of a Southwest Indiana highway took hold as part of a new Interstate 69 corridor. A year later, in 1992, a group called the Interstate 69 Mid-Continent Highway Coalition formed to promote a transcontinental highway that would spur economic development for isolated rural communities. The road was nicknamed the NAFTA Superhighway, referring to the North American Free Trade Agreement. The meetings were held in the middle, Memphis, Tennessee.
All the states in the corridor would meet down there: Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas.
Back home, Hoosiers were hard at work, led by folks like David Graham and Jim Newland. Both were from Daviess County. Newland was the coalition secretary, and Graham has been called the father of I-69.
There was still activity going on in Indiana, very serious advancements with it, getting it into approved documents that it needed to be into to be built. So Indiana, when we would meet in Memphis with the other states, we were far ahead of all the other states.
But progress on I-69 sputtered. Impact statements were delayed. Opponents of building a new terrain route argued an indirect route going through Terre Haute would be cheaper and more efficient. In 1999, an environmental impact study was initiated for I-69. And INDOT officials said a decision on whether the interstate should be built was 2 years away, if it were to be built at all. State highway officials favored the direct route near Bloomington because it was shorter. Plus, that route would bring economic development to underdeveloped counties. Meanwhile, more than 20 mayors in cities along the corridor, including Evansville and Bloomington, petitioned Governor Frank O'Bannon in favor of the direct new terrain route. As debate swirled, he made a momentous decision. He chose the direct route going from Evansville through Bloomington to Indianapolis.
Let me just say this, that this is the best route for Indiana for all factors considered. And let me assure you, everyone has been examined.
O'Bannon was known as a consensus builder, but in September 2003, he died after suffering a stroke. His wife, former First Lady Judy O'Bannon, tells us the thinking behind his interstate decision.
He always said, we've got to have that north-south connect on the west side of the state. It has to be brought into the whole fix, not just because there's smaller communities that need economic influx, but because we need what can go on that corridor to link up with I-64, to get up into the northern part and link in with Chicago and link in with New York. We have to be connected.
In March 2004, the Federal Highway Administration approved the new terrain direct route in its record of decision, the same route O'Bannon favored. Federal officials divided the building of the interstate into 6 sections: Evansville to Oakland City, Oakland City to Washington, Washington to US 231 near Crane, Crane to Bloomington, Bloomington to Martinsville, and Martinsville to Indianapolis. Joe Kernan, who became governor after O'Bannon's passing, said the interstate would be a job creator and help the entire state. But where would the money come from? Mitch Daniels, who became governor in 2005 after defeating Kernan, had said as a candidate that he would be the one who builds this road. Once in office, he announced major moves, a plan to bolster the state's economy by building up its highway infrastructure. The plan was largely funded with revenue from leasing the Indiana Toll Road in the northern part of the state. At the ceremony marking I-69's opening, Daniels described what it was like as he and 3 others opened the bids to lease the Northern Indiana Toll Road.
And when we opened the last envelope and saw a bid for essentially $4 billion cash, we all instantly saw a whole new future.
It was anticipated that the 75-year lease would provide enough money for all of the state's transportation projects in the next 10 years, including starting on Interstate 69. But lawmakers still had to pass the plan, and many faced pressures at home. Becky Skillman was lieutenant governor at the time.
To say it was easy to pass the Major Moves initiative in the General Assembly would not be accurate. I mean, the proposal to lease the Northern Indiana Toll Road as a financing mechanism became highly controversial. You know, this is a new concept to Hoosiers.
During the legislative session where Major Moves was introduced, Hoosier Voices and several organizations that are supportive of I-69 organized a major rally in the State House. It was probably one of the biggest rallies in support of legislation in the history of the State House. We organized, I think, about 7 to 8 busloads of individuals from Evansville alone to come to the State House. There were people throughout Southwest Indiana that traveled to be there. Governor Daniels spoke at the rally, all in support of Major Moves. So when you see pictures of people in yellow shirts, the signs, and they talk about Major Moves, that was a key turning point in the legislative session.
The bill passed in the state Senate easily, then it squeaked through the House by just 3 votes.
Really, at the time, it was the dream of the Governor Mitch Daniels, his vision for I-69 and his willingness to work with the federal government, as well as state government, as well as the people the group that leased the highway and up in northern Indiana. Without that leadership on the part of Mitch Daniels, it would not have happened.
The project faced other challenges. In October 2006, environmental groups and 6 southern Indiana residents sued to block the planning of I-69, saying INDOT, quote, ignored harmful environmental impacts. But the courts disagreed and ruled in INDOT's favor. On July 16, 2008, construction began on Section 1 of the Interstate, a 13-mile stretch from Evansville to Oakland City.
And I think just when you saw the dirt starting to be removed and shoveled that you knew, hey, this is really going to happen.
Although interstates are national projects, it's up to states to build and maintain them within their borders. In the Hoosier State, that's where INDOT comes in. Safety is the priority.
I think this project and this corridor has been set up for success by really the steps that we've taken to get it right from the start, to put it in the ground with the foundation to really have success.
It takes a lot to build an interstate, a lot of steps, a lot of time, a lot of thought. Some of those processes include just some conceptual planning of where the interstate should go. Then we need to evaluate the impacts and evaluate the benefits of such, and then really working alongside the communities to maximize the effectiveness and the safety aspect of that.
There were public meetings. Utilities had to be moved, impacts assessed and mitigated, state highways upgraded, properties and rights-of-way acquired, and roads closed for construction.
In the environmental phase, people really didn't know what to expect. They didn't know how they would be convenienced or inconvenienced. They just knew it was change, and they thought maybe it would take up too much right-of-way and affect too many people, which it did not. And I think the interesting part was once they understood what it was about, what kind of improvements were going to be brought to our state, attitudes and opinions started to change and started to move in a positive direction.
The silly things I remember really stick out in my mind all these years later, like somebody threw a pound of bacon at us one time.
It was going to be a new way of life, and it was going to be a facility and an asset that actually increased the quality of life, not only for those who lived alongside it, but those who lived by it, as well as provided their livelihood.
I think back to the public hearings in Bloomington that where you had to have security with you because it was so controversial. I look over to the line of trees shortly after the I-64 interchange where protesters were living in the trees for some time when the construction started. So it brings back a lot of memories, and it makes all of the supporters feel really good. And the trees are still there.
I think it's easy to look at something that's impacting you personally and take a negative opinion on it. What's harder to do is take a step back and look at the benefits for your community, your region, your state, or your country.
When I first got involved with I-69 on the environmental studies, we had a project office on the south side. Right next to that project office was the Stop I-69 office. Happened completely by chance. So when you have a strip corridor, and so we had I-69, yay, and right next to us was Stop I-69.
The first 3 sections of the Interstate project, totaling 67 miles, officially opened in November 2012, each at a ribbon-cutting ceremony featuring Mitch Daniels. 3 years later, on December 9, 2015, Section 4 opened with an event headlined by Governor Mike Pence, who had succeeded Daniels. The stretch of road was 27 miles, from US 231 near the Naval Support Activity Crane military installation to State Road 37 near Bloomington.
One administration with strong support in the legislature, one administration found the money, another administration poured the concrete. But this is what good government looks like, men and women, and we show the way in Indiana.
Section 5 of the project included the conversion of 21 miles of State Road 37 to interstate standards, from south of Bloomington to Martinsville. But it also drew concerns over the project's impacts. Opposition, which had built over the years, included protests of the route's path.
Here in Bloomington, we already had State Road 37, and we had connectivity all the way up to Indianapolis, so people didn't really necessarily understand the significance of having that interstate highway, and they didn't have the same level of interest in it as the folks further south.
Ultimately, the area's decision on Section 5 of I-69 came down to a vote by the Bloomington-Monroe County Metropolitan Planning Organization's Policy Committee. The group had to vote on whether to include Section 5 in its Transportation Improvement Program. If it wasn't approved, federal funding could be held up. Just the year before, an extension of I-69 as part of Section 4 had passed the committee by just a single vote. Before the vote on Section 5, Hoosier Voices for I-69 and the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce arranged a helicopter ride to show MPO members the new terrain portion under construction south of Bloomington.
I knew at least 2 folks on that helicopter ride were opponents of I-69. And so it was really interesting to watch their faces and see how they were recognizing this is really here.
Section 5 was included in the Transportation Improvement Program on an 8-4 vote. The construction phase of Section 5 then presented its own challenges. Jason Rhodes worked as a project director.
To me, I-69 Section 5 represented an interesting change in the flow of the I-69 project as a whole. For one, it was the first segment of the project that was being reconstructed along an existing highway corridor.
And there was the terrain.
It's a hilly area that has a lot of caves. So we had to be very careful that we were not disrupting the existing network of caves and waterways that exist underground in Bloomington.
But there was another challenge. A public-private partnership that had been set up to manage construction stalled, frustrating subcontractors and motorists. With work dragging on, the state proactively stepped in to take over in 2017. INDOT assumed the construction manager role, a historical first.
INDOT is accustomed to overseeing a contractor doing its work, but not telling subcontractors each day, go here, go there, do this, and do that. So that represented a big challenge for our team to step up into that role.
With INDOT at the helm, the schedule was reassessed, communication with local communities became more transparent, and confidence in the project was renewed.
INDOT was proactive. Our team stepped in and took over. It was the right move, but it wasn't without its challenges to get that done.
Section 5 from Bloomington to Martinsville opened in the fall of 2018. The section's completion also left one section of I-69 to go. Governor Eric Holcomb, who followed Pence into office, seized an opportunity. He announced his next-level connections plan, which included $600 million to speed up completion of I-69 Section 6 by 3 years to 2024 instead of 2027.
That was a huge sigh of relief at the project level because it allowed us to pivot from thinking about how are we going to fund this, how are we going to break this corridor into different segments to align with funding availability, to pivoting into focusing on design and the ultimate construction of the project.
That provided some certainty and some predictability of the completion of this, and made no mistake that we as a state wanted to complete this. The end goal was never in doubt.
But it wouldn't be easy. The portion between Martinsville and Indianapolis was one of the most difficult to build along the corridor. The 26-mile stretch involved constructing 39 new bridges and 14 new overpasses and underpasses. 14 traffic signals were eliminated, and nearly 3 million truckloads of dirt and stone were excavated and moved. The work on Section 6 was dubbed the I-69 Finish Line Project, in a nod to the Indianapolis area's racing heritage and because the completion of the project was in sight.
To be able to fund a project like that over 2 decades, it's an incredible outcome, and one that I think proves Indiana's ability to get big things done.
For a project like I-69, being of national and international importance, we wanted to try to get it done as soon as we could. So to be able to take some dollars, $600 million, and speed up not just the traffic but the timeline to completion was making up for lost time.
While planning the interstate, INDOT and its partners worked with local stakeholders to focus on how the project would fit and provide benefits within their communities.
Working with INDOT throughout the years was fantastic, especially when you had an administration, actually administrations with an S, that were in support of this highway.
I don't know at the start that I expected it to be as collaborative as it was. I had constituents and businesses that would come to me with concerns through the process, and I would take those and relate those to INDOT and talk about the problems or concerns that propped up.
INDOT's work with communities is evident along the corridor. Bloomington, for instance, was able to keep a partial interchange at North Walnut Street open to help with traffic from Indiana University. In Johnson County's White River Township, the old fire station at Smith Valley Road and State Road 37 had to be acquired. That allowed INDOT to provide a functional replacement that is located on 2 major crossroads and on a school campus.
All of the key players were in the same room talking about the project and how it would impact the community, not only after the project was complete, but during the project.
In Martinsville, the project's design incorporated bricks to match the Morgan County Courthouse. Other design elements there paid tribute to the area's mineral wells, and the Grand Valley Boulevard Bridge won design awards. Among other things, it features a very visible M in a nod to nearby Martinsville High School. Jen Goins, the Martinsville Final Design Project Manager, talks about how the plans came together.
One thing is, it's noticeable when you drive through Martinsville that the aesthetics were thought through. There was a plan, and the city was super important in how that all transpired.
The Grand Valley Boulevard Bridge replaced a dangerous crossing area where pedestrians would cut through a fence. The bridge now allows high school students and residents to safely reach neighborhoods, retail stores, and the school. Eric Bolin, the school superintendent, is a former city council member who was part of the process. He is also a former teacher and principal at the high school.
I cannot tell you how many times that we had to stop school or had to stop events because of accidents that occurred on that highway. And to see the safety precautions that have gone into play and the fact that no students, no injuries have occurred with people crossing the highway. I have not seen a single accident there now since.
To not have the bikers and the walkers and the baby strollers coming across State Road 37 and having them have a safe passage between their neighborhood and the shopping and the jobs across the interstate is awesome. I just love that. We were able to get that for Martinsville.
When pitching the interstate, advocates saw the possibilities: safety, accessibility, time savings, and opportunity.
It has brought a lot of benefits to Evansville and to Indianapolis because that's a major place where people want to go. It makes all the difference in the world for tourism, and you have to count on tourism a lot. It contributes a lot to the state of Indiana.
I think what communities are going to experience is just increased opportunity. Obviously, safety. You've got a state-of-the-art highway that's going to move people from the southern tip of the state of Indiana up to Indianapolis and all points in between.
I know that many communities now are taking advantage of economic development planning to take advantage of all of the opportunities from I-69. One community in particular that I think has done a marvelous job would be Washington, Indiana, and Daviess County. I've applauded them time after time for having a 10-year plan in place for the time that I-69 was complete. And they've been taking advantage of that every day, including attracting new businesses to the area.
Beth Gabhart, a Discover Downtown Washington board member, agrees.
Washington is a small town, but it has a lot of opportunity for potential and growth. We want to be that community where if you work in a different city that's close by, we can be that bedroom community.
Mike Duke, a developer and home builder in Bargersville, told us he once was a little apprehensive about the interstate coming through the area, but now he sees its advantages.
With 69 being completed, I really believe that that's going to enhance this area even a little bit more because it's allowing people to get to places a little bit quicker and more conveniently.
I-69 gives us the opportunity to educate children in a different way so they can see bigger things, better things that they may not get to see here. It opens up that door, especially for a mom. If you've got a van load of kids and you know you're going to be on the road, you want to take the quickest way there, the safest way there.
The corridor that was selected, we fixed issues with State Road 37 that were there that would not have gone away had we built I-69 somewhere else.
If anyone would have made the drive from Indianapolis to Evansville in 1970, or to do it later this year, the differences, the positive differences, would be more than in evidence.
This has been in the works for so long, and it's finally becoming something. So as you're driving through the job, just know that people built this. Like, this is how America runs.
To see your work grow, it is very satisfying. The end results are amazing. To be able to be a part of the addition to the city, it's exciting, it's great.
It snaps all of our transportation assets together. Roads, rail, the airport, and the freight being moved on I-69 that will ultimately end up all over the world and all over the country. It also has a lot to do with safety, having this direct route. It has a lot to do with small towns that dot the route from Evansville to Indianapolis onto the border of Michigan, quite frankly, and connecting 3 states, 3 countries, trading partners of ours.
On August 6, 2024, the final ribbon was cut on the I-69 finish line project, opening the interstate across Indiana. It was the end of a decades-long journey. The southwest Indiana portion of I-69 includes numerous new bridge spans and thousands of beams. Millions of cubic yards of earth were moved. Indiana also preserved or planted more than 6,700 acres of forests while protecting streams and wetlands. The drive from Evansville to Indianapolis now takes approximately 2 hours and 36 minutes, compared to roughly 3 hours and 15 minutes before.
When they cut that ribbon, I just looked around at everybody's faces. And I could see joy. There was joy. And it was just really satisfying to see that.
We asked folks to sum up in one word what the project's completion means.
Transformational.
Opportunity.
Safety.
Game changer.
United.
Opportunity.
Joy.
Win.
Transformative.
Vitality.
Safety.
It's gigantic.
Opportunity.
Promise.
A legacy.
An amazing accomplishment.
Here is why it's special. There's no pride feeling in there, because I feel like a little small speck in the team. But it does ground me in I am connected.
If my dad, Jim, were here today, he would be incredibly proud of what was accomplished.
The men and women that have been on the project and what they've delivered, really it's been the best of the best of the best that have been involved with this corridor.
To every person that's worked on this project, I just say thank you. I know that it's been a long project. It's been a project that's been full of accomplishments, but also full of challenges. And it's been amazing to watch, and to each and every one that's participated, I just say thank you on behalf of all Hoosiers. Thanks for getting it done. Thanks for proving that we can do big things in this state.
This is more than just a highway, it's a monument to the determination of the people of Indiana and leadership for generations to leave this state better than we found it, to create opportunities for our children and grandchildren.
I'm just proud that so many people took part in this, the thousands of people you'll never meet that are the actual reason it's there. And they'll be able to drive on it for decades to come, and their children's children will be able to drive on it for decades to come, and understand that my grandpa or my grandmother or my aunt or uncle worked on this road, built this road.
I really believe that the meaning of I-69 as the biggest, as the boldest of all the major moves may be to say to ourselves as Hoosiers, and while we're at it, to the rest of the nation, out there in Indiana, there is one place where things aren't crumbling. There is one place that is looking forward. There is one place that has enough of a can-do attitude to figure out how to solve the biggest problem.